Hey guys, and gals out there. I wanted to start a guided drawing course for creativity. Drawing has been a huge part of my life over the years, and I've met some really, really amazing people through this medium, and I wanted to share the things that I've learned and the practice of drawing to shed light on ideation through the figure. I guess to set the stage, this will probably be about 30-40 minutes-ish. So if you can find time in your schedule to kind of sit down and relax and, maybe grab a coffee or a tea. I don't know where you are or what time of day it is. To sort of, get comfortable and grab a sketchbook, or maybe even if you're drawing in Photoshop or whatever the program you're using, to kind of, come along with me for the ride. And I will try to, go through the process of just different ways of approaching the figure to shed light on not the way of drawing, but a way to draw, which I think is, always exploration and always fun. I would say it's very important to note the intention of this class or this session and sessions to follow. It's not necessarily about nice drawings. It's about the process of just focusing on what you're presented with and try to tackle it in the best manner as possible. So the intention is the intention is eventually to draw quite well, but this is essentially like, going to the gym for drawing. And if you're open to learning and growing and, exploring, this is for you. I really want to, create something that is value and kind of give back to, the community. I know during these times are very interesting, and I just want to see if I can, shed light and do my part to kind of, open doors for folks that might not have access to drawing classes and whatnot. The pose length for today will be about 5 minutes, so it'll be somewhat of an energetic pace. But I want to go over some fundamentals to begin with. For those of you who might not have drawn, for others, if you want to skip ahead, that's totally up to you. But I want to go over some just basic kind of guidelines or outline of a process of how to approach the figure. So as you can see, we have a figure here, and there's some terms that I may use as I'm going through the process, and also I'll highlight kind of like the approach of kind of how I would look at this figure. I would start when looking at this figure, because it's all about you're trying to place this in space on the page, obviously. So I would approach it maybe lightly, and I would actually draw a frame as best as I could, eyeballing it. Clearly this, I won't be tracing these drawings, but I would be eyeballing a shape about like this for the start of a drawing. And then I would try to find identifiers. I would try to find, let's say, landmarks, bone, landmarks, hips, sort of the angle of where the hips would be. I might draw an arrow for the hips would be, because then you get the points, then you get the center line. For knees, sometimes I would draw circles just to sort of have them in place. As well, I found for the foot, I would approach it as almost a triangle, in space. I find, maybe three-dimensionally, but I find most feet fit within that sort of realm. And, shoulders, there's also the breastbone here, which could be used as an identifier. The cranium of the head, I'd usually try to find the direction in which the figure is facing. And you could sort of hang everything off of that afterwards. The rest of them would be, somewhat cylindrical in representation, where you could sort of start to build your drawing off of these geometric shapes, which are just like identifiers. There'll be other times where you will be drawing, let's say, through the figure to kind of get a better idea of, let's say this arm, how does that go? Does it go straight down here? You're trying to line up the wrist, and sometimes, you're guessing where things may be so that on the other end they do pair up and make a little bit more sense. But yeah, that's kind of like my approach and my practice that I'll be trying right now. Over time, this will evolve. And yeah, I guess let's get started. Right, so I have my first pose here. And I'm just going to hide these, find a layer I can draw on. And yeah, so essentially looking at this pose, it would be the same kind of principles that I kind of outlined prior. So I am going to press play, and I'll have all these sort of tools that I've been using below in the doobly-doo, so you can find them and tag along if you want to. I'm working in Windows, so please don't hold that against me for folks who use Procreate. I have nothing against it. It's just, yeah, use what tools you have access to. So I would start here, again, trying to place this figure in space. So again, trying to find that shape that makes sense, maybe paired up like this. Have a baseline right here. Your head you'd want to keep within the frame, and her chin here. So for me, I tend to try to find the hips. I try to find those as soon as possible, if possible, just because I find that I can anchor everything off of those, off of that landmark. But it looks like with this figure, I feel, and sometimes it is mostly like a feeling when you're approaching something, is what is easiest access to kind of begin, what is the easiest buy-in. So again, shoulders here, moving down the arm, the bicep here, onto the hands, right, like her back is coming up, arcing up here, her stomach. We've come upon the hips, so we know in which direction they are facing. We know that she's facing down, and we know that her thigh that is coming up is right here. And some of these poses are definitely, I would say, sometimes a little bit more challenging than your everyday poses, but I find the best way to learn sometimes is to just jump right in, jump in the deep end, and just start drawing. I think it's very important to just like get into the practice of drawing. So essentially trying to find the right angle there. This is here. Her knee is making contact with the ground. And we're also looking at negative shapes, which would be a shape like this, something that I didn't cover, but it is also a way of looking at the figure. So the heel, we have the hamstrings coming down. Again, really trying to pay attention to what you're looking at. We have the nose angle here, mouth, the ears here. Yeah, I find that when you have poses that you are forced to draw a little bit quicker, sometimes maybe out of a comfort zone, you are paying much more attention to what you're approaching, because time is important, is a resource that is fleeting in this process, and you have to utilize time the best way possible. Again, like elaborating on these shapes, the nose here, eye here, coming in. All right, so on to the next pose. For those of you, you can flip your pages, and again, you're going to approach this trying to find the shapes in which to encapsulate the figure best as possible. Here we are, and head placement is about here. Angle, that is about here. Again, the hips are, I didn't start out easy on myself here in regards to picking poses that I could find the hips easier, but it's just another way to break down and focus on what you can see. I'm trying to, so I'm using her collarbone as an identifier in regards to where to find the other shapes. So I have her head here, shoulder, arm here, coming down, okay, and chest, stomach, hips around here, so very slightly, even though you don't quite see that perspective there, I'm just going to drop them in. And yes, angle of this, these line up, the knee and the elbow. There's a little bit of, what is it now? Leg is in the distance. Oh, going the wrong angle here. So her forearm looks, this arm looks much larger than this one because this is receding into the background. So knee here, anchor down, foot, again like a triangle. Toe bone, other toes as they line up. Just dropping those in as gestural. And that's very much so what we're doing. It's a very gestural, faster approach. The reason for this, looking at negative space right here to find the heel, is that you want to set up a tempo that you're always adjusting and learning and taking in as much information and you're giving yourself enough time to draw that information. Oh, there's times my program kind of hangs, but I have workarounds for that. So, hand is here. Sometimes when you're laboring a spot, you can move on someplace else. Looks like this shirt is working. The mouth, the nose here, the eyebrow. I'm going to labor these parts. Her chest here, she's wearing seems to be a summer tank top. Drop that in. Belly's here. Arm is coming in from the other side. So, yeah, move on to the next pose. This one looks a little bit easier in regards to shape recognition. So here and here. So I'm going to start at the hips here. That makes sense to me. Looks like her legs come in here. Knee. And her legs are folded underneath. So I'm going to try to do that. We have her foot here. This looks like a very difficult pose. She has her bottoms here, arcing around. So now we establish the knee, trying to find where the shoulder may be, making sure that the spine and the back is in the correct angle. Might be the easier approach of using the angle of the back of the arm. And the bicep over here. So you're moving past her shoulder. Square for her hand. Have her face peeking through here. Again, like when you're drawing, eventually, for those of you who have drawn for a long time, you guys know that you have your own landmarks for certain features that make it much easier to sort of recognize and put down. And that's good. For individuals that are still getting into drawing, it really comes down to you building up your vocabulary, your own vocabulary, that you get from drawing from the figure, drawing from life, drawing from things that you enjoy. And the more that you draw, I've got the rib cage here, the more that you'll become acquainted with these little icons that you might see as like, oh, he's doing that fairly quickly. But that is, over time, you begin to understand what you're drawn to and what you like to use to represent certain shapes. Can't find her other. Looks like her hand is over here. Should pay a little bit more attention to what's going on here. Looks like the knuckle. Looks like her thumb going into her hair. This one is very somewhat unconventional. I think if you actually had a life model, she would definitely want out of this pose after a few minutes. Move in, and I think later on, once, let's say, get a few series of these going back through and maybe trying out shading. All right, this one is a little bit more complex, which is totally fine. All right, so hands up here. The reason why I'm starting up here as well is that when looking at the drawing, you're looking for, in planning your approach, and I see, because this is an area that is furthest away, is going to be problematic, and potentially I would draw it off the page. I don't have much height here, so it could go off the page, but considering that it is the furthest element, sometimes you have to adopt your approach so that you're keeping that in mind. So we have her back here, just so gracefully under her leg. That is elite flexibility. Some of these yoga practitioners are wonderful to use for reference. Take such care of their bodies and can move them in such interesting ways. You can get lost in the figure. I find that is interesting. You always want to be drawing things that you're interested in. And I think that is definitely the juice when it comes to drawing. It's you're drawing things that you're curious about. And these drawings are very curious because you could draw somebody standing up straight, which is fine, or you could be forced to really hone in and pay attention to how you're going to approach this pose. I always find I like things that are challenging because you really have to pay attention and you develop a keen kind of like sensibility of what you're approaching. Sometimes it's more difficult, but again, it depends on what your goals are. And we're not here to do nice drawings. We're here to pay attention to anatomically what's going on with the figure and how you interpret these shapes which can be very challenging. So I'm going to come in here after I establish these. Sort of the skeleton of what I'm doing. Eyes, eyebrow, lash, ear. Her hair is flowing down, and she has these straps come here. A lot of musculature in the back, very strong. Elbow, wrist, here. Usually I try to approach the knuckles in regards to what angles they're going. Not sure how much time we have, hopefully. Get an indication of what is going on up here. There's a lot of overlap, underlap going on. Sometimes you gotta pick your battles. Alright, so moving on to the next pose. And I have this grid under here just to kind of help give a guide of how much space I have. So with this figure, start here. Again, this doesn't have to be perfect. It is a rough guesstimation of what you're drawing. It's generally this shape, I think. Hand down here, posteriors here, shoulders, head, chin. She's really tucking her back down. She's pushing, using her arms to really extend. So this is her shoulder here. This is her back up here. So it's always important. Arms are coming down here. To be looking at the figure appropriately. Looks like musculature is here. I gotta clean up the angles. So her shoulders here, coming down, elbow, arm, tricep. This looks like her clavicle, but that is not that. Shoulder blade. It is her shoulder blade. Come here. Come under. This is a lot of it tighter here. Posteriors here. Angle is a little bit sharper. I think sometimes get into a little bit of a pickle. You're in an area too long. So I'm going to leave that and fill in some of the other areas. So the other leg, knee, shin, the foot here, your toes are up. Heel, toes are up there. this is very loose. So the angle that we're dealing with is here. Her chest is there. This arm might have to move back. All of this builds your observational muscles based on making mistakes, which is part of the process. And this is one of the reasons why sometimes taking on challenges is the best way to learn, because if you always drew something easy, you would never make mistakes, and the exploration purpose would be lost to a degree. Right. Moving on to next figure. So, top shelf of where her shin is, rear of her leg comes down here. And then we have forearm, this arm, and then based on her hips, her head is approximately here. Again, most of this will make sense once you pick an area to start, and I think the area to start again is up here, because if some of you start someplace different, you will become aware that there's a reason to start here. Because I used to make, and I still make that mistake from time to time when it comes to drawing, is that the planning phase is so critical. Because you could end up with maybe you end up with a drawing you really like, but you might not have all of it in frame. So hips here, her strength of this pose is very, there's a lot of power here. Chest, rib cage, but then it looks like there's a twist here. Coming down. Here, but then knowing that she is balancing all of her weight on this forearm here, it's a lot of power. So She's looking down. It's like her traps are firing. Ear. Start to move into her chest area. Some of these pants here. Kneecap. Ankle. I think this pose is a little bit more like that, but we'll live with it. And we have her hand. All right, into that one. Just finding the next pose. Definitely much more difficult. All right. So again, as you can see, sometimes you get lost in the approach, what you're drawing. It's always good to have a process of how to approach it. Being that the leg here is the part. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit to make sure that I can fit the whole figure on frame here. I'm going to approach this figure here. The knee, hips, over here, and this. Incredible back strength, spine, shoulders, forearms, other leg here, thigh, calf, so over top for thigh, heel, big toe. So once we have the structure, we can sort of go back in this. Really hone in on how you're approaching this here. Back, chin, your head, your forearm is here, so this arm might even come down further. So you can see the negative space between there. Wrist. this wrist over here. Chest, intercostal muscle, hips. It's not quite right. Her ear, her hairline. So we have to see eyes, bottom of her nose, mouth looks right about there, eyebrows about there. All this muscle here. And this pose looks familiar. I think, yeah, all right. Let's try this out. So, shape looks like this square. So I'm going to start at her head, find her chin, move on to her shoulders. We have her chest. It doesn't seem that it's proceeding too deep, considering we're facing it dead on. We have her torso. Also, we have to note the angle. Pardon me, allergy season. So we have her hip bones here, and essentially her knee comes out about that far. So, again, also checking negative space. You can see that we match that up as best as possible. This leg is coming down. To this ankle. It looks like her foot is on its side. So I'm just going to draw it like a triangle, but there'll be a little bit of an underside here. Knee, quad, hand, again the angle in which her knuckles go across. She's clasping at her foot. And then her arm, which comes down about here. Like this. We have her rib cage here, belly button here, pants here. Chest. Looks like I did it again. Right. Here to find the appropriate angles. Head is a little bit big. Maybe. Smile looks like a wonderful day on the beach. My goodness. Flex through here. All right, well, didn't quite finish the hand here, but got that pose in. I think this one might be the last ones. Let's do this. Okay, so this straight down. So it might be easier. So we have our torso coming up through here. Belt line here. So she's got a little twist. You can see your clavicle bones are here. Chin is here. Your hand is on her hip. Don't want to spend too much time there. So we have other parts to take care of, and we want to zoom out a little bit to make sure that we keep things in proportion. Leg coming down here. She's flaring out her leg here. Her knee, hamstrings. We might find another drawing up top here, which is fine. Heel. And her arm. On, majestically looking into the distance. a little bit. Start filling in these blank areas. Knuckle line. Just really flexing in here. Holding onto those toes. Can't forget the foot. I really think it's important to always draw the whole figure. I think I'm going to sort of take a pause here. And actually, I'm going to go through these. Actually, I'm going to leave these drawings for you guys. If you want to go through, you can pause on each one. I'll just skip through here. And you can continue the process. Oh, it looks a little bit tough. You can pause. You have a try to set your own time. I think that's actually the last one. So yeah, essentially, yeah, as we move through, trying to really block out and be aware of the angles and the shapes in which the figure is moving. It's very difficult to actually draw quicker than you're used to, but once you get into the habit of drawing at a quicker pace, that's one of the first sort of gates when it comes to drawing the figure. As we continue along, you'll begin to see your progress improve and your awareness of what you're drawing improve. And that's really what you want to be working on, and not never focus on what you want the end result to be. You have to always be aware of the process. The process is very important, because once you begin to add all of those observations together, you then see at the end what you are paying attention to. But I know for some of us, we always want to look nice. But this is not really about nice drawings. It's about process and observation. Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for watching until the end. Yeah, I guess I'll have a link somewhere, maybe to the next video or whatever. But yeah, I really appreciate it. And yeah, I look forward to hopefully hanging with you next time. If you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them below in the doobly-doo. And take care of yourselves. And we'll see you next time. Take care.